I pretended to be missing for 7 years. Then my mother saw me on TV. I used to dream about disappearing. Not dying. Not running away forever. Just vanishing long enough for people to finally notice what they had done to me. Funny thing is, when I finally disappeared, nobody came looking. At least not at first. My name isn't important. If you hear this story and think you recognize me, you're probably wrong. The people involved changed names years ago. Some of them moved. Some of them are dead. But the truth? The truth stayed exactly where I buried it. Until my mother saw my face on television. That was the night everything collapsed. And if I'm being honest, I deserved it. I grew up in a tiny town where everybody knew everybody's business. My mother worked at a church daycare. My stepfather repaired trucks behind a gas station off Route 9. We lived in a faded blue house with a collapsing porch and a yard full of dead grass because nobody remembered to water it. From the outside, we looked normal. Inside that house, things were different. My mother had this strange ability to love people only when other people were watching. In public, she touched my face gently and called me her miracle boy. At home, she barely looked at me unless she was angry. And she was angry a lot. Mostly because I reminded her of my father. The real one. He disappeared when I was 4 years old. Nobody knows where he went. My mother claimed he abandoned us. My grandmother whispered he might have been dangerous. I never learned the truth. But every time my mother looked at me, I saw resentment in her eyes like I was the living evidence of the worst mistake she ever made. By 14, I learned silence was survival. By 16, I started planning my escape. Not because I hated them. Because I honestly believed nobody would care if I vanished. And that belief became the most dangerous thing that ever happened to me. The night I disappeared was October 11th. Cold rain. Empty roads. One duffel bag. I remember every detail because I replayed it for 7 years. My stepfather had been drinking again. My mother accused me of stealing money from her purse. I didn't. But truth never mattered in that house. The argument escalated fast. Screaming. A broken plate. Then my stepfather shoved me into the hallway wall so hard my vision blurred. And something inside me snapped. Not violently. Quietly. Like a rope finally tearing. I walked into my room, grabbed the backpack I'd secretly packed months earlier, and climbed out the window. That part sounds dramatic, but honestly, nobody noticed. I stood outside in the rain for almost 10 minutes staring at the house. Waiting. Waiting for someone to open the door. Nobody did. So I walked. I made it 30 miles before sunrise. A truck driver picked me up near a diner outside Bell County. He asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. That became my specialty after that night. Lying. I lied about my age at my name, my hometown, my past. Eventually, I became someone else entirely. And it worked. Too well. For the first few months, I lived in shelters and cheap motels. I washed dishes at roadside restaurants under fake names. I slept in bus stations. I learned how invisible lonely people really are. Nobody asks questions if you look tired enough. One night in Memphis, I met a man named Leon outside a convenience store. He was smoking beside an ice machine when he noticed me counting coins for instant noodles. "You homeless?" he asked. I shrugged. He studied me for a second and said something that changed my life. "You look like someone trying not to exist." I still think about that sentence. Because he was right. Leon let me stay in a spare room above his tattoo shop. He didn't pry. Didn't lecture me. Didn't ask for my story. For the first time in my life, someone gave me kindness without attaching guilt to it. Eventually, I started helping around the shop. Cleaning floors. Scheduling appointments. Learning designs. And slowly, I became real again. Or at least a newer version of real. I changed my name legally when I turned 18 using forged documents Leon helped me acquire through questionable connections I never asked about. That should have terrified me. Instead, it felt freeing. Like cutting the last rope tying me to my old life. The missing person investigation barely lasted 6 months. I know because I secretly checked online. There was one newspaper article. One blurry school photo. A few Facebook shares. Then nothing. No vigils.no search teams.no desperate television interviews. Just silence. I stared at the screen for hours that night. Part of me felt relieved. The other part? Destroyed. Because even after disappearing completely, I still wasn't worth finding. Years passed. I got older. Healthier. I started tattooing professionally. Leon said I had steady hands and sad eyes, which apparently made clients trust me. I built an entirely new life in Nashville. Friends at an apartment, a dog named June. Sometimes I almost forgot I used to be someone else. But trauma doesn't disappear just because your address changes. Every October I stopped sleeping properly. Every time I saw a police car, my stomach twisted. And every time someone asked about my childhood, I panicked. Because the truth was impossible to explain. How do you tell people you willingly became a missing person? How do you explain that nobody chased after you? Then came the interview. The stupid, meaningless interview that ruined everything. A local news station in Nashville was doing a segment on recovering addicts and second chances. One of my clients recommended me because I used to volunteer at outreach programs downtown. I almost declined. I should have. But the producer insisted my story was inspiring. A man who rebuilt his life from nothing. If only she knew. The interview aired on a Thursday night. 3 minutes long. I talked about survival, reinvention, community. I smiled into the camera like a normal person. And somewhere, 700 miles away, my mother saw my face. I found out 2 days later. I woke up to 23 missed calls from Leon, then pounding on my apartment door. When I opened it, he looked pale. "You need to sit down," he said. My entire body went cold instantly. I knew. Before he even spoke. I knew. "She called the station," he whispered. "Your mother." I couldn't breathe. The room suddenly felt microscopic. Leon handed me his phone. There were screenshots everywhere. Facebook posts, old missing person photos beside my interview image. Comments exploding underneath. "Oh my God, that's him. He's alive. After 7 years." The article had already spread across local news pages. My hands shook so badly I dropped the phone. Leon asked if I wanted him to call a lawyer. But I couldn't even process language anymore. Because buried beneath all the panic was one horrifying realization. My mother looked for me. After all this time, she recognized me instantly. That night, reporters parked outside my building. Someone leaked my address online. People I'd never met suddenly cared deeply about my disappearance. News channels framed it like some miraculous mystery. The boy who vanished. The missing teen was found alive. They had no idea the truth was uglier. I didn't run from kidnappers. I ran from home. And I stayed gone because nobody made me believe I should come back. Then my mother called me directly. I still don't know how she got my number. Probably reporters. I stared at the screen for almost a minute before answering. Neither of us spoke initially. Just breathing. Finally she whispered, "Why?" That single word shattered me more than anger would have. I expected screaming. Instead, she sounded broken. And suddenly I hated myself for wanting her pain. I thought nobody cared, I admitted quietly. There was silence. Then I heard her crying. Real crying. Not the performative kind from childhood. The ugly kind. "You have no idea what this did to me," she whispered. And before I could stop myself, I snapped. "What about what you did to me?" Silence again. Heavy. Terrible. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I knew you hated me," she said. "But I never thought you'd erase yourself." That sentence haunted me for months. Because maybe she was right. Maybe disappearing wasn't escape. Maybe it was revenge. The public became obsessed with my story. True crime podcasts contacted me. TikTok detectives analyzed my old family photos. Strangers debated whether I was selfish or traumatized. Some called me a victim. Others called me evil. Honestly, both were probably true. The police eventually interviewed me. Technically, I hadn't committed a serious crime. I disappeared voluntarily before adulthood and stayed hidden under false documents afterward, which complicated things legally. But they were more interested in the emotional side. "Why never contact your family?" one detective asked gently. I didn't know how to answer. Because there wasn't one reason. There were thousands. 1,000 moments where I felt unwanted. 1,000 nights feeling invisible inside my own home. 1,000 opportunities for someone to notice I was drowning. And eventually, I disappeared so completely that even I stopped recognizing myself. A week later, I agreed to meet my mother. Publicly, everyone expected a heartwarming reunion. They wanted tears. Forgiveness. Real life isn't like that. We met in a therapist's office because neither of us trusted the other enough for privacy. When she walked inside, I barely recognized her. She looked smaller, older, fragile, and for one terrifying second, I saw not a monster, but a human being. That made everything harder. She cried immediately. I didn't. I couldn't. Years of emotional shutdown don't suddenly reverse because someone's crying in front of you. She kept apologizing. For the drinking. For the screaming. For not protecting me from my stepfather. And every apology landed too late. Like flowers at a grave. Then she said something that changed everything. After I disappeared, my stepfather spiraled hard. Drinking worsened. Violence escalated. Eventually, he assaulted her during an argument and got arrested. She divorced him shortly after. Then he spent years searching quietly for me. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Quietly. She showed me folders filled with printed photos, private investigator receipts, and maps with highlighted towns. I stared at them in disbelief. You looked for me? Her face crumpled instantly. Every day. I felt physically sick. Because for 7 years, I built my identity around being unwanted. And now the foundation beneath that belief cracked open. That doesn't mean everything healed magically. Trauma doesn't dissolve because new information appears. Part of me still blamed her. Part of her blamed me too. Even if she never admitted it aloud. How could she not? I disappeared and let her believe I might be dead. 7 years. That kind of pain changes people permanently. The media eventually lost interest. New tragedies replaced mine. That's how news cycles work. 1 week you're a national mystery. The next week you're forgotten again. Oddly enough, I preferred it that way. I was exhausted from strangers turning my pain into entertainment. People love mysteries until they discover the answer is just sadness. I wish I could tell you my mother and I rebuilt everything. We didn't. We tried. Some wounds heal crooked. We speak occasionally now. Birthdays mostly. Holidays sometimes. There's kindness between us. But there's also grief for the years we destroyed. Neither of us knows what to do with that. The strangest part? I still don't regret leaving. I regret the silence afterward. I regret convincing myself I deserved to vanish. But leaving that house probably saved my life. And admitting that truth doesn't erase the damage it caused everyone else. 2 things can exist together. That's the hardest lesson adulthood teaches you. Someone can hurt you deeply, and I still love you. You can survive something terrible, and still become the villain in someone else's story. A year after the reunion, my mother mailed me a box. Inside were things from my childhood she'd kept untouched. Drawings. Report cards. A broken watch I loved when I was 9. At the bottom was a photograph of me sitting on the porch steps, smiling at the camera. On the back, she had written, "I never stopped waiting for you to come home." I stared at that sentence for hours. Then I cried harder than I had in years. Because the most painful realization wasn't that my mother failed me. It was understanding she was damaged too. And damaged people often destroy the things they love accidentally. Sometimes people online still recognize me. A cashier once asked, "Aren't you that missing guy?" Missing guy. Such a strange identity. As if disappearing became more important than existing. I smiled politely and said yes. But internally, I wanted to tell him something. I was never truly missing. I knew exactly where I was the entire time. The real tragedy was that I didn't believe anyone wanted to find me. If there's a reason I'm confessing this now, it's because people romanticize disappearance. Especially online. They fantasize about starting over somewhere new where nobody knows them. And for a while, it feels beautiful. Like freedom. But eventually your old pain catches up. Because no matter how far you run, you still bring yourself with you. I learned that too late. Leon died last winter. Heart attack. Completely unexpected. At his funeral, dozens of people showed up with tattoos he'd done over the years. Tiny pieces of permanence he left on strangers. Before they lowered the casket, I touched the wood and whispered thank you. Because he saved me when nobody else did. Not by fixing me. Just by seeing me. Sometimes that's enough. I think about my younger self often. That terrified 16-year-old standing in the rain outside his house waiting for someone to stop him. I wish I could go back and tell him this. You do not need to disappear to deserve love. You do not need to erase yourself to escape pain. And becoming invisible will never heal the part of you begging to be seen. But maybe the cruelest truth is this. If my mother had never seen me on television, I probably would have stayed gone forever. And that thought still keeps me awake at night. So yeah, that's my confession. For 7 years, I was one of America's missing people. Not kidnapped. Not dead. Just hiding from a life that hurt too much to survive. And when my mother finally found me, neither of us knew whether it was a miracle or another tragedy.